Welcome to the New Thinking for a New World podcast, where we explore the most pressing issues that are challenging and changing our societies. We are looking for new thinking and new solutions wherever we can find them. Listen as host Alan Stoga, the Talberg Foundation's chairman, challenges his guests for analysis, ideas and actions. Together, we can help make our world at least a bit better.
The world is a mess. A summer of deadly heat and other natural catastrophes has demonstrated the immediate consequences of accelerating climate change. The onset of famine in parts of Africa and elsewhere have underscored the fragility of the conditions in which many millions of people live and struggle to survive. The mutating coronavirus and the appearance of monkeypox are reminders that pandemics might become part of the new normal. And social and political tensions are high and rising, not the least because of the war in Ukraine. To quote the Ghostbusters, who are you going to call? For many, the answer is science and technology. We are in an era of dramatic scientific discovery and technological innovation. Amazing advances in robotics, nanotechnology, genomics, neuro-technology, life sciences, and beyond are as much characteristic of our time as are the messes. And unlike the messes, they offer potential pathways to a more robust, resilient, and potentially prosperous future. My guest today plays an interesting and important role in the process of transforming scientific discoveries into practical realities. Scott Cohen is co-founder of New Lab, an American-based effort to bring together entrepreneurs, engineers, and inventors to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here, Alan. Thank you so much.
Let's start with the meta question. Are you confident, and if so, why, that disruptive technologies can be harnessed at speed and at scale to push societies towards better outcomes?
I mean, I'm hopeful, and I do have a lot of faith in science and technology to usher in technologies that improve lives in the next 100 years, the way they did in the past 150 years. I think anytime there's invention and innovation and discoveries that impact human lives, there are really positive outcomes, but also inherently unforeseen and negative outcomes. And I think we'll probably have some of those as well. But I am confident that that at the very time that we're confronting some of the really daunting and austere challenges that you signaled in the beginning of this discussion, that it is a paradox that at the same time those seem insurmountable. There is a lot of new science and invention and a generation of youth that are harnessing the tools we've invented with the last generation of tools to solve problems. I think it's pretty inspiring, and it does give me hope.
Let's talk about the process. I know that you and others driving New Lab in particular say it's not an incubator. What is New Lab and how does it work?
Well, New Lab is a center of invention. So we really focus on supporting and nurturing and collecting a high concentration of people that are inventing solutions to challenges. So these are people, like you mentioned, working in nanotechnology, working in genomics, working with robotics and sensors. And increasingly, solutions we see today are not solutions that use one of those technologies, but many of them. It's usually a confluence of many technologies that address problems. And so we built a facility for sure that is one of the tools that people that are part of our community and network use as a resource, as a place to meet one another, as a place to prototype, place to actually build the early stages of their companies. But at its heart, I would say New Lab is the translational layer. We actually have methodologies inside New Lab that are deployed by our team to act as the translational layer between existing infrastructure in the world that is looking for a way to transform themselves and to kind of turn around the bend of history right now and become a different kind of organization, or apply new solutions to waste streams, or new solutions to retarding carbon emissions, or new types of materials. Well, it's very difficult for large organizations or even governments to make those changes, because generally large organizations in the world are designed and built to repeat the same thing over and again and build for efficiency. Whereas new companies, new inventions often aren't exactly right the first time. They really need to pilot and test in the field with the infrastructure that exists in the world. And they actually need different capital structures. And so we consider the inventors and the engineers and the scientists the DNA of what we do around the world, but we actually serve both. We actually sit in the middle and act as a translational kind of midwife between large organizations with the appetite, the desire to embrace the kind of change that is healthier for the planet and for people on this planet, and the entrepreneurs and engineers that are trying to enter the world in one form or another. And we really believe markets are a verifying factor. Like if you can't build a solution that is going to be embraced by a market in some form or fashion, you're not likely to actually have the impact that we all desire in the world.
There are a bunch of threads there on which I want to pull. Let me say one thing first. I should have said up top that New Lab is physically located in Brooklyn. So essentially sitting in New York City, which is becoming, in part because of the work you've done in New Lab, a more and more important place for innovation. We usually think of the West Coast and Cambridge, but you've put Brooklyn on the map. In the process of your description, you just used the words partnership and community, which I want to ask about. Those are collective concepts. They're cross-fertilization kinds of concepts. And some of us have in mind that old garage with Steve Jobs and Wozniak sitting there making a computer for the first time and giving birth to Apple. Yours is a fundamentally different model that incorporates not just, as you said, inventors, but also companies and governments and engineers and scientists. How do you create, sustain, and nurture those kinds of communities?
Well, a reasonably good mental model that inspired us when we were designing New Lab as a place and a system was like, the cafeteria at MIT, not the media lab, but the old MIT, where people would bump into each other and talk about the things they were working on, and exchange ideas, and parts of the building where you could go down and essentially put up false walls and start experimenting with something that you did the math for, and now you want to build some sort of physical manifestation of it and invite people down to look at it. Similarly, at Bell Labs, there was a lot of that happening at Bell Labs. The difference between both of those is that MIT is an academic institution. It is they do have a long history of being in a place where new ideas are born. Bell Labs similarly had the same kind of culture, but was owned by one corporation. And ours is very much a ground up. There's a group of investors that formed a public-private partnership with the city and state of New York, and we do, have a business there, a few businesses, but it really is a ground up kind of place. You get there, you feel that people that belong to New Lab feel like they have a sense of ownership. And I'm speaking about the scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs. And then increasingly companies that work with us, if a large corporation comes to us, it's not like they can take up space at New Lab and take an office along with entrepreneurs and engineers. That's not the way it works. We really, what we do with large organizations, we say the way you interact with this community, the way you get them to think about your problems, because they're not likely the kind of people that are ever going to take a job with your company. But the way you get to interact with them is by engaging with them through a process, through the innovation studios we create. And that process is what engenders the kind of relationship that really yields really milestone-based results that are measurable and accountable, the way a large organization that's trying to navigate complex systems in the world would need to make decisions about what to do next. So it does become a kind of community, because most of the corporations we work with come back year after year for more of the same, because it's actually a very efficient way to harvest innovation. Because it's not just who's in our building; it's really like it's very specifically. Once we identify a challenge, we're using our network to scour the planet, Israel, Turkey, the Balkans. We want to know who has some piece of the solution to that problem, and then we rank them and bring the superstars together to actually deploy pilots.
That's an important point. You're not passively waiting for someone to knock on the door. You're actively trying to address issues and find, as you said, the superstars that have the potential to do so, right?
Our outreach is rooted in a design around a challenge. So we design the outreach around a very specific challenge, and then that entire system that's designed is designed to look for either someone that has a solution, but usually it's people that have many parts of a solution that then are introduced to our clients, vetted, critiqued, and then that leads to pilots, to investments, sometimes to acquisitions, but often to new innovation. And sometimes we discover there's a lot of great knowledge and research there, but really there is not a single company that is solving that, and we need to build a new company, in which case we have teams that then work on growing a new company from the ground up, and you can imagine that is a long road, but it's something we really believe in, and we believe that with our network and our team, that we can de-risk the early stages of starting a company, because it's rooted in a specific challenge. We have real world examples of the demand and need, and we can build around that, as opposed to just having an idea, spending 3 years building it, and hoping you're going to find someone that will test it. So we really are focused on trying to take huge leaps forward, but also to mitigate as much risk as we can.
I want to get to the capital question in a minute, but you use the term innovation studio, which I know has a particular meaning in the New Lab ecosystem.
Yeah, innovation studio is a process that is a product, but it's also a process that was born out of CEOs of large organizations coming out to New Lab and asking us how they can get people like this thinking about their problems. And our answer to that was this process we created, which really is based on this belief system that large organizations don't need any more white papers about how to solve their problems. They actually need solvers. They need people that can actually do the hard work. And we fundamentally believe that if you could pick almost any problem the world's facing or an organization is facing, and you're probably going to find an entrepreneur, an engineer, an inventor out there that's already been thinking deeply about some aspect of it. And so you might find someone, like I was on the phone with a CEO of a very large company this week that runs one of the largest logistics operation in South America. And they expressed to us, like, we know that we're going to find founders that can solve our mobility and logistics issues 5 years from now with all kinds of amazing solutions, and people that are the 20 and 30 yard line of those solutions. But we really need to find people that are at the 80 yard line, that are near the goalpost on solutions for the next 2 years. And we're willing to invest in both. But like they would consider the studio not fully realized that we couldn't solve last mile solutions with EV in the next 2 years in a pretty significant way. So that changes up the way we are designed the challenge. We know that we have some very near term solutions we need to solve, and then we've got medium to long term as well, which obviously could be things like hydrogen and other forms of mobility. And so, just to clarify, the Innovation Studio are generally year-long cycles. We design the challenge with our partners. We do the outreach around the world. We receive submissions, usually hundreds, and then we rank them. And then a subset of those become part of the program. We actually pay them to deploy pilots, and then there are other outcomes after that. And usually there's a second year and a third year cycle that advances these things.
If you feel that the world lacks global leaders, please help support the Thalberg Foundation programs. Individual donations are being accepted at thalbergfoundation.org/donate. That's TALLBERG foundation.org/donate.
Speed and scale, we need both, obviously. But getting things from that prototype stage, as you've described, and scaling to the size needed to address even small aspects of big problems requires a lot of capital. Even wonderful breakthroughs require both money and political will to make them happen. There aren't a lot of recent examples, I don't think, although the vaccine response to COVID might be one.
Yep.
Can you think of others? Or how do you, better than can you think of others, how do you incentivize the capital to take great ideas and run with them, as you said, from over the goal line?
Yeah, I mean, it actually has to make sense. I really think that we have to believe that the most interesting problems, if solved correctly, create jobs and opportunity, and and have a really a market force around them. I think that the real pickle is time, like the lens that venture has been conditioned to look at investing because of we've just been through a software revolution is not really appropriate for the kinds of innovation that we're confronting now, because it does take longer. It is harder to pivot when you're developing physical prototypes, and you've got to deploy them out in the field, learn from what's going on with 300 vehicles and how batteries are getting recharged, and then maybe go back to square one and redo it again. So I think that there does need to be, and I think I am seeing, a different class of more patient capital, and also different structures of financing infrastructure. You don't really, like a lot of companies in this space have really heavy infrastructure costs. And if we can create the appropriate debt instruments for those, where they don't have to raise venture capital to then go finance infrastructure, then they can stretch their dollars a lot further. So that kind of world is emerging around these fields that we're talking about. And I also think there's a role to play with the large companies in the world, like the Fords of the world may discover that, they are a service company more than they are an automobile company. And and I think they're all, we're working very closely with Ford. We're building a facility in partnership with them in Detroit. And our partners in South America are interested in, can Ford help us fulfill the scale that we need to realize our logistics challenges? And so we have to ask those questions of our partners and see if they can help as well.
Can you give us a couple examples of things that projects, maybe innovation studios, that really excite you at this point in terms of either really cool technology or, far more importantly, real promise to address some of the kinds of existential issues I know you're working on?
I mean, there are many. We have, I think, around 23 innovation studios running concurrently right now. We are one that's pretty interesting that's emerging right now is focused on building a healthcare company out of an apparel company. So it's a company that sells close to the skin apparel, and they're really interested in how they can, turn the apparel into a sensing device to sense really critical health issues in people, and actually working a bit with our friends up at Tufts as well on some technology that they have at Silk Lab. And so, that studio emerged out of a very large company realizing they have a lot of knowledge and know-how, and they have a massive, reach in the world. And what more could they do to serve that constituency? And so they wanted to try and build, a healthcare company around what they already do. That's something dealing with human health. We're working with a large mining company in South India that is interested in building, healthier processes around different types of mining processes, and also looking at ways to address safety issues around the way mine tailings and things are managed around the world. And there's a tremendous amount of, really great work happening there. That industry, which, is perhaps viewed by some people as a very dirty industry, but basically everything we touch in the world comes from a material. We're not going to stop relying on materials. And it's an industry that finally, because of, groups like this and the studio we've built, which is in its third or fourth year, is really, aggregating all the different thinkers around the world that have solutions to problems around both environmental and safety issues, and aggregating them together and partnering with other mining companies that are also joining the studio. So it's, you can imagine now we have, I think, 3 different large mining companies that are all feeding off the same flow of opportunities. We're also working now on a blue economy studio focused on ocean and micro industries that are emerging around keeping our coastlines robust and clean and safe, and also looking for opportunities of new materials that may come from things like seaweed and kelp, which are really significant carbon sinks and sources of nutrition and potential materials for replacements to materials otherwise created by fossil fuels.
Let's talk ethics for a moment. Scientists and at least some technologists often argue that ethics is the user's problem, not theirs. They just invent and they make and they create, and whatever happens to it. Somebody else should worry about it. I know that is not the New Lab approach, that you seek to embed ethics in the process of technological evolution and adoption. But how possible is that really? And I'm thinking about everything from potential uses like autonomous warfare to neuro-technologies that might impinge on free will. There's a lot of really funky stuff going on out there. In the genetics field is an obvious one. Is it ultimately about trust? And must we just trust that the technology will be well used? What can you do to try to improve the odds that trust is well founded?
Well, no, I don't think we should just trust that things are always going to be used for good. I think generally entrepreneurs and inventors are going down a path, and they want to have those conversations. I don't think most people I meet want to leave it for somebody else. I think it's many things that are invented it's going to be a long time before a regulatory body actually is ever wrapped around things like all the work that's happening with brain machine interfaces right now by pioneering engineers. It's pretty daunting to think about the fact that we can't even really manage social media, and yet we've got people taking machine learning and AI and then imagining a world where that is hooked up to your brain and both bidirectionally. That's a pretty like we're when we read we're basically looking at our phones is a brain machine interface. We're just doing it optically right now, but we're getting all the dopamine kind of pulses constantly. And I know that you share similar sentiments. Like it's sometimes I step back and go, holy shit, I've lost control and I don't know
what could possibly go wrong,
what I'm doing. Yeah. And so imagine like a direct link into our brain or information entering us in ways that are passive and we don't even realize it. So I think the ethical discussions really are, there's probably more of an imperative now than ever before. And, on scale with other, great inventions, you think back to the Manhattan Project and those guys, once they got deep into it, they realized that there was a lot of great potential to what they were inventing, but holy shit, this could have really significant implications on the world, and we're living in it, And so, yeah, I don't think there's a clean answer to that, but I do know that when we organize groups of people and we're working with new technology, we always try to have that voice at the table, and to keep people in check and thinking about what could be the negative implications of what we're working on.
Your own background is in photography and film, among other things, not science and engineering. How did you make the leap from that world to this world? What is it about the creative process that informs every great photograph that helped you to imagine, build, and now nurture New Lab?
Well, I mean, what got me here was really, I'm deeply, deeply curious about everything. I had science kits and chemistry sets and subscribed to science magazines, but I also was always kind of an outsider and observer and someone that gathered as much information as I could. And I chose to go into the arts as a form of expression and a form of sending signals to people about what I see through film and photography. But there was a certain point, 9 or 10 years ago, where I did feel like I had a civic itch, and I was trying to figure out how do I do that. I'm not really trained in anything specific, yet I do have a skill set to connect people. And it was just fortuitous that my partner David Belt, who I'd known and done some projects with, was invited by the Bloomberg administration to think about what the center of gravity or center of invention would look like in New York City. And we really took stock. We went around New York City and realized, wow, there's a tremendous amount going on. There are people tucked away in basements of universities. There are people taking ceiling tiles out of buildings on Wall Street, building all kinds of strange contraptions, doing great work. But none of them really know each other. None of them bump into each other. They struggle to get access to the resources to get, across town to do something, or they're sending parts other places to China or the Midwest. And we realized that New York needed a center. The Navy Yard was a natural place for that, and that's where they wanted us to look because Bloomberg really pushed hard to make the Navy Yard, which is a complete industrial park where there used to be 60,000 employees during the World Wars working there building ships. That was largely abandoned, and it was really fortuitous that the crown jewel of the Navy Yard, the former shipbuilding facility the machine shop was in derelict condition, and right at the entrance to the Navy Yard, it made sense to make that the first kind of landing pad for this. And so, yeah, I came at it sideways, but I figured out how my skill sets could add value to the equation. And I'm really am a beginner all the time. I'm meeting scientists and like our friends at Tufts and learning about what they're doing and trying to connect the dots, and then trying to then connect them with people in the world that can actually help them realize the vision they have with the science and technology that they've been working on.
All of which is a fundamentally creative process.
It is. I did see a quote by Wim Wenders the other day, which is appropriate. And the quote was, "The most political decision you can make is where you direct people's eyes. Art must inhabit its audience to create change."
Well, I'm glad you used the word politics, because my last question was going to drag you into the political sphere. I introduced New Lab as an American institution, which is clearly more about geography than it is perhaps about perspectives or even values. We live in a world at the moment where competition and even confrontation seems to be growing, not diminishing. You live in a world which is fundamentally about cooperation in order to produce and engender progress. How do you avoid that competitive, confrontational, geopolitical world in order to solve the problems you're trying to address?
I think we have something like 31 or more nationalities working out of New Lab, but I agree with you that there is a lot of competition, primarily between China and America and Europe. And it's really I don't really feel that invention moves very, very slow in Japan. It happens, but it doesn't reach markets as fast as it does in America. There's a reason even people in Europe try to come to America to actually launch their companies, because things just move at a faster clip. They're embraced more quickly. But I think that there is a world that we're experiencing right now that feels like it's becoming quite polarized. And I think there are certain types of technologies that are and should be of national security concern, that we should be minding what we're doing and who we're sharing it with. And we should be minding what's going on in other countries, because the intentions may not be the same. They may not be noble intentions always. And, a lot of the technologies we use today came out of the military, the internet and M&Ms and lots of things. But I think it's, I think it's always been that innovation has been driven by national security concerns. A lot of innovation has been all over the world. And you asked a question that's difficult to answer, obviously, but I'm not naive. I think we have to actually mind our P's and Q's, and we at New Lab, we have to actually do that as well. We have to be sensitive to what foreign nationals are coming into our building, and how information is being shared, and who our investors are, and all those things.
So between scratching your civic itch and eating M&Ms, I haven't quite decided what to call this podcast, but I want to thank you very much for the conversation. Clearly, on New Thinking for a New World, we often dwell too much on what I said at the top, the messes, and not enough perhaps on the potential solutions to those messes. And New Lab is clearly one of the places on the planet where those potential solutions are being hatched and developed and maybe brought to size and scale. So thank you very much, Scott, for the conversation. We learned a lot.
Thank you very much. It was really wonderful talking to you, and I look forward to more conversations and more from the Tallberg Foundation.
Thank you for joining us. Please rate our show on Apple Podcast and subscribe. Meanwhile, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter at tallbergfoundation.org to learn more about our work. That's TALLBERG foundation.org. Thank you, and we'll be back again next week for another episode of Tallberg's New Thinking for a New World. This podcast was brought to you through the generous support of SNF, the Stavros Niarchos Foundation.